With the recent takeover of second-hand General Electric -9 locomotives, in today's video we will look back on the Buffalo and Pittsburgh Railroad's once unique EMD roster, as well as looking at some of the present-day motive power for the railroad. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the video. The day's date is June 30th, 2022, and we are in the small town of Salamanca, New York. This is the home base for Buffalo and Pittsburgh train SIRI, running from Salamanca down to Riker, Pennsylvania. In charge of today's train would be EMD SD50-3, number 5020, SD40-2, 3328, SD40-2, 6072, and SD50-3, 5018. The EMD SD50 series of engines were very short-lived on the Buffalo and Pittsburgh, with the railroad only officially owning 3 of them, although LTEX 7005 was also on the roster for a brief time. EMD's SD50 models were notorious for being mechanically challenged and would often find themselves in their shops down in Butler, Pennsylvania, but after less than 3 years of being on the property, they were shipped off to the Maryland Midland Railroad, which they now call home. Not long after arriving, the set of EMDs begin to build their train and soon blast off for points south. At the border of New York and Pennsylvania, SIRI crosses under State Route 219 as they slow to enter the town of Bradford. After the engines cut away from their cars, they pulled up past the south end of the siding in order to reverse into the American Refining Group's Bradford location. Making pickups here is part of SIRI's daily work, as northbound counterpart train RISI usually drops empties the previous day. This gives us a chance to look up close at a unique engine in today's consist. WCOR 6072 was built in 1970 for the Canadian National, before being sold to Alstom in the 1990s for rebuilding, along with several other CN-owned SD40s. A total of 160 locomotives were sold to Alstom and were rebuilt into SD40-3 specifications. CN agreed to buy back about 75 of them, and 2 eventually found their way into the hands of the Buffalo and Pittsburgh, those being 6072 and sister engine 6059. Moving south a ways, we find local train BR1 waiting in the siding for SIRI to clear. Power for the train today would be GP38-2, number 2001, and GP40 2031. 2001 has since been relocated to another G&W subsidiary company, and 2031 has since been relocated to the Rochester and Southern and repainted with the G&W corporate paint scheme. In a meet no longer possible on the railroad, SIRI continues south past BR1 as they prepare to battle the steep grade up to Mount Jewett, Pennsylvania. Starting in Lewis Run, the Buffalo and Pittsburgh Mainline ascends into a steep 1.5% grade that lasts all the way to Mount Jewett. A location known as Droney's Curve is a popular location to catch the train working its way uphill. Turn up your speakers and listen to the EMD prime movers give it all they got to get up and over the hill. Just south of Mount Jewett, Pennsylvania, lies the crest of the hill, and the 149.6 approach signals. These ancient Baltimore, Ohio signals date back to the 1950s, and are still littered across the Buffalo and Pittsburgh Railroad in 2024. Perhaps one of the most recognizable locomotives that the Buffalo and Pittsburgh rostered was its fleet of 13 ex-Conrail SD60I and M variants. My first encounter with these would be on February 21st, 2022. SD60M 3891 can be seen here charging south through Carrollton with quite the unique EMD consist. Chasing it down into Bradford, we get a nice slow roll-by of the entire consist. Behind 3891 would be SD60s 3883, 3882, GB38-2 3512, SD60M 3888, triclops SD60M 3892, and Canadian-built SD40-2 3342. SD60M 3892 is very unique compared to the other SD60s the BMP had. It was the only locomotive on the property to feature the special 3-window cab design, or triclops as many rail fans call it, due to its heritage. While all of the other SD60s on the property were built for Conrail, this one in particular was built in 1989 for the Burlington Northern Railroad, and has spent the majority of its life out in the western states. Eventually, it wound up getting sold to Norfolk Southern, where it operated for a very short time before being sold to the BMP. In downtown Mount Jewett, remnants of the line's history can be seen in the form of trackside objects. Most notably are the Baltimore and Ohio signals which I mentioned earlier in the video, that still stand watch over the line. Here we see an approach signal guiding SIRI down the hill into Johnsonburg. Another artifact is the wooden sign on a nearby circuit box, also from the B&O era of the line. During a chase of Bessemer and Lake Erie's missed job, we paid a visit to the Buffalo and Pittsburgh Railroad's Butler shops while we were in the area. This is the main repair facility for the railroad's motive power, and one can often see lots of goodies lying around the shop area. Today would be no different, with WCOR 301 acting as today's shop switcher. We arrived to see 301 moving a GP40 number 3107 to a different track. WCOR 301 is an SD40-2 built in 1972 for the Quebec, North Shore, and Labrador Railroad, and was sold to the Wellsboro and Corning Railroad in 2010 before being transferred to the Buffalo and Pittsburgh in 2013, along with sister units 302, 307, and 309. 307 and 309 lasted in service for a few more years before heading west to another G&W subsidiary, before both had mechanical issues. 301 was the last of the four on the B&P, before being shipped off when the new Dash 9s came in 2023. Subsequently, all four now sit rotting in the National Railway Equipment's Yard in Paducah, Kentucky. On the morning of July 3rd, 2023, we are back in Salamanca, New York. Another trio of SD60s can be seen here, with the crew preparing for departure. In the siding track by the station, GE XR 3393 and SD40-2 can be seen alongside two of the railroad's SW1500s. This was just a few months before the arrival of the first Dash 9. Moving to the east side of Salamanca, B&P 3883 gets its train up to mainline speed after exiting yard limits. In Limestone, New York, the train passes by what used to be a set of signals, which have been turned and had their heads removed for many years. After receiving permission from the dispatcher to start their work in Fosterbrook, 3883 accelerates its train forward out of a stop to make its pickups from the refinery. Bradford, Pennsylvania, once the high-grade oil metropolis of the world, produced 81% of the oil and gas used in the United States in 1800, and 70% of the world's oil. Bradford produced more than 630 million barrels of oil from 1871 to 1967. While those numbers are lower nowadays, Bradford's oil industry is still going strong. After making its pickups in town, SIRI continues south through the bustling industrial landscape in town. Charging up the 1.5% grade out of town, these SD60 locomotives are giving it everything they've got to get it over the summit. During their time on the property, these SD60s slowly began to have more and more traction issues, leading them to sometimes stall out on the steep grade out of Bradford towards the end of their time on the B&P. Thus was the case on October 17, 2022. With a very long train out of Bradford on this day, the trio of SD60 engines were not enough to get the train over the hill, and would lead to a very interesting afternoon of operations. With wet leaves falling on the rails, it would make it even harder for the train to get up over the hill, but today they just wouldn't make it. After stalling, the crew first decided to apply the handbrakes on their train, and then run up the hill, light power, in order to clear off the leaves and to drop sand on the rails to increase traction.
Are they doubling it?
After returning downhill, the engines will reconnect with their train and try the hill again. This scene is one that rail fans often flocked to the Buffalo and Pittsburgh to get, a matched trio of ex-Conrail SD60s working their way uphill in beautiful fall color, and is a sight and sound that will be missed here in the hills of rural Pennsylvania. Control Point Boyer is the north end of the Mount Jewett siding, and home to another set of Baltimore and Ohio color position light signals. SIRI would stall a few more times before they decided to double the hill, which involved splitting the train into two chunks to get it over. If you'd like to see more on this specific operation, I will have a link to the day's full video posted in the description, and linked at the end card of this video. In the meantime, here is SIRI rumbling through CP Boyer in beautiful fall foliage. As the saying goes, all good things must come to an end, and by January 2024, very few of the Buffalo and Pittsburgh's 6-axle EMDs were active on the property, all being replaced by second-hand General Electric C44-9Ws. Quite a few other G&W subsidiary companies are seeing the same fate, with their older EMD products being replaced by GE-8s or 9s. I got my first look at the -9s on January 2nd, 2024. Once again, we return to Carrollton, New York, and see the new face of the railroad as B&P 4933 leads SIRI through town. Later that same day, we would see SIRI once again, as it rolls downhill into the yard in Johnsonburg. These new -9s had no issue taking the heavy train up and over the hill, as we see them passing the signal set here in North Clarion, deep in the woods of Pennsylvania. After about 30 minutes of watching SIRI enter the yard, we heard the distant rumbling of its northbound counterpart train, RISI, returning northbound back to Salamanca. In charge of the train were the last two active SD60s on the property, 3891 and 3885, sandwiching two new -9s. I find it ironic how the first SD60 I saw on the B&P was 3891, and the last SD60 I saw on the property was also $38.91. Over on the south end of Johnsonburg, SIRI is departing southbound for Riker Yard, with a fresh crew on board. The engineer gives us a shave and a haircut horn show as he throttles his train over the massive 690-foot rivet-connected trestle. The SD60 series of engines are currently calling the Ohio Central system their new home, with plans of phasing out the older SD40-2s on that property currently in the works. The SD40s have been spread around to various G&W subsidiaries, such as the Rochester and Southern and Marquette Rail, and the SD50s have been transferred to the Maryland and Midland. I hope that everybody enjoyed today's video, and please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, as to not miss any future uploads to this channel. This is Anthony with Northern Ohio Railfanning Productions, signing off.